From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Thank you very much for joining us here on Politics Now. I'm John Langler. This week, Joe Biden officially accepted the Democratic nomination for president. The Democratic National Convention did have some Southern Nevadans front and center on the agenda. And in the final night, though, Democrats focused on the pandemic, climate change, and criticizing President Donald Trump. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Alexandra Limon has a recap.
So it's with great honor and humility, I accept this nomination for President of the United States of America.
In his first official address as the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden made his case for the presidency.
Character is on the ballot. Compassion is on the ballot. Decency, science, democracy, they're all on the ballot.
Biden said on day one he will implement a national strategy to fight the pandemic, including manufacturing medical equipment and PPE and implementing a national mask mandate. Throughout the night, Democrats blasted President Trump's handling of the pandemic.
You know, when Donald Trump spoke at his inauguration about American carnage, I assumed that was something he was against, not a campaign promise.
California Governor Gavin Newsom mocked President Trump for threatening to defund the state's wildfire fighting efforts.
Because he said we hadn't raked enough leaves. You can't make that up.
Newsom delivered his remarks a short distance from one of the hundreds of wildfires raging in California.
The hots are getting hotter, the dries are getting drier. Climate change is real. If you are in denial about climate change, come to California.
In his closing message, Biden promised to fight for the environment, science, and for all Americans, whether they voted for him or not.
For love is more powerful than hate, hope is more powerful than fear, and light is more powerful than dark.
Alexandra Limon.
California Senator Kamala Harris accepted the vice presidential nomination earlier in the week. She is the first woman of color to appear on any major party ticket. Harris said the nation has to do better with race relations. In her speech on Wednesday, she also paid tribute to her late mother, an immigrant from India.
Probably could have never imagined that I would be standing before you now and speaking these words. I accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States of America. There is no vaccine for racism. We've got to do the work. For George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for the lives of too many others to name.
Former President Barack Obama spoke in the lead-up to Senator Harris, and he says, in this election, America is at stake. On the Republican side of things, on Thursday, President Donald Trump campaigned in Biden's native Pennsylvania, and he attacked Biden on economic issues.
Joe Biden has pledged to hike your taxes by $4 trillion in the largest tax hike in history, and they're going to waste the money on the Green New Deal.
President Trump told that crowd in Pennsylvania to imagine, quote, the smoldering ruins of Minneapolis or the violent anarchy of Portland as a vision of life under a Biden presidency. Now back to the Democratic convention. Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto was featured on Monday night, and she responded to President Trump's criticism of Nevada's mail-in election process.
Donald Trump is trying to divide us by undermining that right. He has threatened to withhold federal funding to Nevada because of our vote-by-mail system. That's funding our schools and seniors rely on. He has challenged us in court with a meritless lawsuit, one that our Republican Secretary of State has asked the judge to dismiss. Mr. President, Nevada is not intimidated by you. America is not intimidated by you.
President Trump has sued Nevada over its plans. We're going to have more on the election effort here in Nevada in just a moment. Another Nevada Latina politician was featured prominently on Tuesday at the DNC. Nevada State Senator and senior advisor to the Biden campaign, Ivana Kinsella, was named as one of the 17 rising Democratic stars.
Unlike Donald Trump, Joe Biden will actually enforce Buy American rules, investing in American-made clean energy, building materials, high-tech equipment, and R&D, all creating more good jobs.
Kinsella is the first Latina to serve in the Nevada State Senate. Here in Las Vegas, Republicans held several events this week in response. A Latinos for Trump event took place on Monday.
On the Joe Biden economic plan, he has said already he wants to raise taxes, trillions of dollars of taxes. He wants to take back the Donald Trump tax cut. He wants to raise taxes by another third. He wants to put back in place, he signed this manifesto of a campaign platform that would take all the Obama-era regulations that Donald Trump has taken off the books. They would all come back on the books with people like AOC and others leading the way to ban American energy, ban fracking. So here's the thing, it's just math.
That is the voice of Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union. He and Ambassador Rick Grinnell were at that event along with the Trump campaign bus. Nevada Republican congressional candidates Dan Rodimer and Jim Marchant were there as well. We're going to have an interview with Rodimer a little later on in the program. A separate event later in the week featured former Nevada Senator Dean Heller. Next week, Republicans will nominate President Donald Trump at their national convention. The full list of speakers has not yet been released, so we're not entirely sure right now if any Nevadans will be featured on the agenda. Nevada Republican Party Chairman Michael McDonald was selected as the Assistant Secretary, though, for the RNC. The convention will start on Monday. The president accepts the nomination on Thursday from the White House. Other speakers we do know of include the McCluskeys, a couple from St. Louis. They were in the news for pictures that showed them on their front lawn pointing guns at Black Lives Matter protesters. Also, Covington Catholic High School student Nick Sandman, who was a student at the time, you've seen video perhaps of him, and the father of a Parkland High School shooting victim, Andrew Pollock. They are also scheduled to speak at the RNC. There will be more than 100 polling places in Clark County for the election in November on Election Day. 35 early voting spots are also planned for Clark County. However, organizers for the election say they are struggling to find enough workers to staff all of those sites. It only has half of the 3,100 workers they need right now. Orko Manna has that story.
We need those poll workers. This vote is very important in 2020.
Clark County still searching for 1,500 people to help run polling places for the general election. In total, 3,100 workers are needed.
We're using slightly more than we normally have in the past.
Clark County Registrar of Voters Joe Gloria telling me that's because of the coronavirus.
We're going to need people to keep the voting equipment and the areas where people are signing in to vote sanitized. We're going to need them to greet the voter and encourage them to social distance.
How do you guys ensure that the poll workers themselves stay safe?
We're providing the PPE that's necessary. We've been with our safety officer and she's taken a look at our layout.
There will be 35 polling places for early voting and over 100 on Election Day. The large number of workers meant to mitigate the colossal crowd seen during the June primary.
That should definitely help the voters to avoid having to stand in line for long periods of time.
This year, all registered Nevada voters will also be given a mail-in ballot. You're allowed to drop off someone else's ballot.
We're confident that the process upholds the integrity, and we're prepared to process those ballots.
Orko Manna, 8 News Now.
Early voting poll workers are going to earn about $14 an hour. Election day poll workers, though, could earn between $225 and $250. Clark County might actually boost that up to try and entice more people to take part. For more information on how to apply, just head over to 8newsnow.com. Nevada Secretary of State Barbara Cegavske is asking for an emergency order so that so-called ballot harvesting can be dealt with in the upcoming November election. Ballot harvesting is when someone who is not a family member collects a mail-in ballot for people and then drops it off. Democrats say this gives expanded access to the ballot. Republicans like Cegavske say it opens the door to potential voting fraud. Now, that used to be a felony, but now it is allowed under a new election law passed in the last special legislative session. Cegavske wants to require ballot harvesters to register with the Secretary of State's office first. She says her office can't properly investigate potential ballot fraud without this regulation. Cegavske's office has previously said it would require people dropping off ballots for others to register with the county where they live. Coming up next on Politics Now, addressing his affair.
I love my wife dearly and my family, and my first obligation is to them and in ensuring that we heal and that we remain together.
Up next, I sit down with Congressman Stephen Horsford to talk about that issue, the next stimulus package, and his opponent in his congressional race. It's next on Politics Now.
In stores and start saving today.
Nevada Congressman Stephen Horsford is trying to keep his seat representing Congressional District 4. His opponent is former Republican Assemblyman Jim Marchant, who we heard from on this program last week. I spoke with Congressman Horsford about an affair that he has already admitted to, his congressional race, and we also started by talking about a new stimulus bill for the coronavirus.
How much time is there? It seems like there's a bit of a threshold here where at some point politics has to give way to conclusion, to action. What can you as a congressman do on the Democratic side to at least find some middle ground to get the wheels in motion?
You're absolutely right. Well, the House voted now 3 months ago on our package, and the Senate still hasn't acted on theirs. But as you indicated, the reality is unemployment benefits expired. There are many small businesses that are still struggling, people who want to return to work but need to do so safely. So my focus has been to get our leadership on both sides in the House and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, to work together. And today, in fact, I just submitted a letter to our leadership asking them to bring up my bill, the Back on Your Feet Act. This bill would extend unemployment, but also provide a back-to-work bonus of up to $3,600 for people who are able to return to work safely to be able to cover the expenses for housing, transportation, childcare, and healthcare expenses, which a lot of people have fallen behind on.
Quite simply, what sets you apart from Jim Marchant?
Well, let me be very clear. There's a big contrast between me and my opponent. First and foremost, I have a strong record of always delivering for the middle-class families in Nevada's 4th District, which is a very diverse district, demographically and geographically. My opponent is wrong on health care. He wants to eliminate the Affordable Care Act. He supports attempts to take away pre-existing condition protections under the Affordable Care Act. He's wrong on gun safety legislation. He's heavily supported by the gun lobby, where I am supported by organizations like Moms Demand Action, and the Brady campaign and Giffords and others. He's wrong on the relief package that we have been voting on in Congress. He thinks that there should not be a federal role to help families that are struggling right now, and I've been working every single day to provide those benefits.
I would like to address something that you've admitted to and you've apologized for to some extent, a high-profile personal issue that came out some time ago. It's been brought up to some extent during the campaign, certainly by critics of yours. Don't want to get too deeply into the issues of the affair, but what does it say about your judgment as a congressman that this has happened and you've acknowledged it? Does it have any weight at all for voters? Should it have any weight up for voters on your judgment for another 2 years?
Well, let me say first and foremost, I love my wife dearly and my family. And my first obligation is to them and in ensuring that we heal and that we remain together as a family. And I have focused in doing just that. I also take my responsibility in serving the people of Nevada's 4th District very seriously. And I have remained steadfast in doing my job and advocating for the issues that matter most to my constituents.
You can watch that full interview with Horsford and watch Marchand's interview at 8newsnow.com. You can just look for the 2020 election interviews under the News tab. Coming up next on Politics Now, dealing with the past.
The problem with Washington, D.C. is mudslinging.
Coming up next, congressional candidate Dan Rodimer addresses 911 calls to his house that have Democrats discussing this as a campaign issue against him. That's coming up on Politics Now.
GN America. You're watching Politics Now.
A group of Nevada law enforcement unions have endorsed Dan Rodimer for Congress. The endorsements include Metro Police's union. The Republican is running for the Congressional District 3 seat. And the endorsers said they were supporting Rodimer because of his support of President Donald Trump. The groups previously supported his opponent, Congresswoman Susie Lee, in the last election. Now, this week I did interview Dan Rodimer. We discussed police reform, 911 calls that we have addressed here on this program before. We also talked about immigration.
There's been a lot of talk about police reform bills, both on the state level and on the national level. What does police reform look like to you?
Well, in regards to the endorsement, Like I said, I'm honored, humbled to be supported by, I think it's 23 or 24 different associations, over 100, I believe it's 100 different organizations, 10,000 police officers. Right now in our district, people want to be protected. Okay, they want somebody to step up and be their voice and make sure they're protected. And like I said, earlier, the fact is they pulled that endorsement from Susie Lee because she's not interested in protecting. My district right now, I talk to these folks. They don't want less police officers. They want more police officers. They want to make sure that if there's an issue, they have a police officer there to protect them.
I'd like to address something that your opponent has addressed herself in an interview that we did a couple of weeks ago. It's a personal issue for you. Calls to 911 back in 2018, no charges, no arrests. You've talked about this, I believe, not too long ago. You previously had an arrest. You went into a deferment program. Democrats have made it a part of their campaign against you. Can you address those charges for the constituents in your district and help articulate if your past might affect your judgment?
The problem with Washington, D.C. is mudslinging. You're going to take whatever you got and you're going to throw it up against the wall. And you're going to see what sticks, right? The fact is I'm going to say this bluntly and loud and clear. I've never been convicted of a crime in my life. Okay? Now, in regards to the 911 calls, it happened. My wife and I, we got into a verbal argument. Okay? And nothing came of it. There was no arrests, no convictions. And later on that day, my wife and I went out to dinner. And we're happily married. I love my wife. I wouldn't be here right now without her.
Would you be in favor of passing any kind of legislation to either, to get rid of DACA, period, and then broadly, what needs to happen with immigration? What would you do as a congressman on the border that is either a continuation of what's been going on under President Trump or maybe something slightly different down the line?
I get this question a lot in regards to immigration, in regards to protecting our borders, and it is an immigration issue. And there's a lot of different ideas out there how to fix this, okay? As of right now, when I get there, I will listen. I will listen to both sides, all right? We have laws in effect right now. And before we start putting in new laws, we need to follow those laws. In regards to the border, right now, I'll say it again. I have 5 children. I got 1 on the way. I'm worried about, obviously drug smugglers and sex traffickers and cartel members coming over. I don't want them coming to Nevada. I don't want people coming out here and pushing drugs on my kids.
Now, we did a very long interview, pretty in-depth with Mr. Rodimer. We talked about the coronavirus, the response, why he wants to open schools right away, and efforts to provide relief to business owners. You can watch the full interview over at 8newsnow.com. We have election interviews all up there under the tab under News. You can also watch our interview with his opponent, Susie Lee, Congresswoman Susie Lee, online as well.